Hello everybody, my name is Michael Wagner. I teach at the Westphal College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And on this channel I talk about digital media, game design and spatial audio. Now this video is a follow-up on a video that I did about a month ago. Back then we looked into how to integrate waves and X with Dolby Atmos on Nuendo. And one of the things that was asked in the comments back then was, why didn't we use the control room, and wouldn't it be easier to use the control room feature in Nuendo? And to be perfectly honest, at the time when I did this video, I had already tried using the control room, but I never really got it to work. So when I created that video, I didn't really think of going that route. However, as I'm contemplating this question, I started to realize that I already found the answer to my problem that I had. So I went back, and you can actually use the control room if you want to. So that's what the video is going to be about today. We're going to revisit everything that we did in that video, and this time we're going to use the control room feature. There are certain things that are easier in the control room. There are certain things that are not as easy. So there isn't really a better solution. So whatever floats your boat, please use that one. Now, before I continue, I need to point out that Waves and X comes in a couple of different versions. There are surround sound versions and there are immersive media versions. What I'm going to talk about and the problems that I had only apply to the immersive media version, to the Ambisonics version of Waves and X. If you're working with one of the surround sound versions, may it be the 5.0, 5.1, 7.0, 7.1, or one of the mix room versions, everything is working just fine, and I might actually do a separate video on that topic alone, because as it turns out, using these types of surround sound versions of Waves and X is the only possibility to actually monitor Dolby Atmos content in DaVinci Resolve Fairlight. But for this particular video, I'm specifically talking about the immersive media version. And the reason we want to prefer that is because we want to also be able to monitor vertical information. The surround sound plugins only give us horizontal information. They give us that information very accurately, and they're very good for that. But they don't include any vertical information. And Dolby Atmos is particularly attractive because it adds this dimension of verticality, the vertical dimension to sound, and we would like to monitor that. So that's why we're using the Ambisonics version. I'm going to start with the same project that I did last time. And I'm going to go through the same setup. However, I'm going to do it very, very quickly. If you want to know exactly why we did certain things that I'm going to do now, please go back to the original video. But I still wanted to kind of just go through the process so that we are on the same page and that we know exactly what's going on. Now, this is essentially a very, very simple track, a very simple project. It contains two tracks, a drum track and a bass track. And the drum track is going to serve as our Dolby Atmos bed, and the bass track is going to serve as our Dolby Atmos object. And let's just have a brief listen. So that's essentially everything that there is to it. Now, in order to turn it into a Dolby Atmos project, there are a couple of things we need to do. We first of all, need to prepare the Dolby Atmos bed. We could directly route the drums track into the Dolby Atmos renderer as a bed, but let's do it the way it's supposed to be done. So let's add one group track that is serving as a Dolby Atmos bed. That has to be a 7.1.2 track. Let's call that Atmos bed. And let's clean that up a little. I usually like to put things on the right, buses on the right. So then we're going to route the drum track into the Dolby Atmos bed. And as soon as I'm doing that, the panner is going to pop up. We're not going to do a lot of panning here. This is primarily for kind of following the setup, what we essentially need to do. So the next thing, we need to set up a track that keeps that holds the Dolby Atmos renderer. So that's going to be a 7.1.4 track, and let's call that Atmos Bus. Let's add that track. Let's once again move that to the right, so that we have everything. Now we need to set up the routing. We already routed the drum track into the bed. Let's route the bed into the bus, and then let's route the bass into the Atmos bus as well. so that the Dolby renderer knows essentially where to find these things, and everything is set up correctly. So the next thing is we need to add the Dolby Atmos renderer, and that's going to be added to the Dolby Atmos bus. So let's add the renderer. Let's just search for Dolby. That will give us only one option, which is the renderer. This is once again the renderer, and the final thing we need to do is in the project settings, we need to open up the ADM authoring window. And I already in a previous run, let me go back and just remove that the way it's supposed to be. So I already did in a previous run tested, and so when you open it up, you will see it like that. So we are going to add the Dolby Atmos renderer, and then we're going to add the bed, and the bed is going to be the Atmos bed, and we're going to add an object, and the object is going to be the base. And that is pretty much it. These things are going to show up here, and now let's see if everything plays correctly. And as we can see, there is action going on. Obviously, because the bed is a stereo track and it's not panned right now, only the first two are active. If you would pan it, then the other channels would come in as well. So that was pretty much it. And if we would just monitor everything binaurally with a fixed head position, we would be fine. But what we want to do is we want to actually monitor that with respect to the position of the head. So we want to keep track of how I'm moving the head so that I'm getting the correct audio impression. And we want to do it once again in an immersive way, which means that we also want to have the vertical information. And the only way to do that with WaveSynX is through the Ambisonics version of the plugin. Now, unfortunately, the Ambisonics version of the plugin has a slight incompatibility with Nuendo. And we needed to do a little bit of a workaround in order to get there. And that was exactly the problem that also made issues or created issues with the control room setup. So let me first kind of go quickly through the steps that we needed to take in order to get to the original setup. Now, we need a WaveSynX in the immersive version is an Ambisonics plugin. So the first thing we need to do is we need to convert the signal into an Ambisonics signal. So we need to add one more bus, and that bus is going to be an Ambisonics bus, and we're going to make that a third order Ambisonics. And the reason we did it in third order Ambisonics, quite frankly, was because it would allow us to essentially export it in third order. WaveSynX is only first order, so we wouldn't actually need third order, but there's no reason not to. And once again, it gives us additional options. So the track is called, or the bus is called Ambisonics Bus, and it's going to output into the stereo out. And at the track, we are once again going to move that to the right, and it's going to be at the very end. So we essentially have this chain now, the bed into the bus, into the Ambisonics conversion, and then into the stereo out. Now, I have not yet set up the connection between the Atmos bus and the Ambisonics bus, so let me first do that as well. So we need to move the Atmos bus not into stereo out, but actually into the Ambisonics bus. And if we now play that, let me just turn up the volume so that you hear it better. We essentially once again have the very same signal. Now, a couple have complained that the rendering, the binaural rendering through the Ambisonics version does not have the same oomph as the Atmos version itself. And you know, there are ways to get around that, but we will essentially talk about that in a second, because we need to do a workaround anyway. So we can't really use the downmix version from Nuendo directly. We need to actually bypass that. Now, where is the problem? Now, technically, because WaveSynX is an Ambisonics plugin, it should actually be possible to just plop that plugin onto the Ambisonics bus and essentially use it there. However, the problem is that even though WaveSynX in the Ambisonics version is an Ambisonics plugin, it does not self-identify as an Ambisonics plugin. It self-identifies as a quadrophonic, a quad plugin, and Nuendo does not really know it is doing Ambisonics. So what Nuendo is doing is it's looking at that plugin if it sits on an Ambisonics bus, and it's saying, well, this is not an Ambisonics plugin, and therefore I'm going to ignore you. So we need to create a workaround. And the workaround that we created is by creating a bus, a special bus that only held the WaveSNX Ambisonics plugin. And that was a quadraphonic bus. And then we needed to disable the panning functions and everything. So to trick Nuendo into using that quadraphonic bus as a first order Ambisonics bus, even though it was not a first order Ambisonics bus. But this was the only way we could get it to recognize the WaveSNX Ambisonics version and essentially make sure that everything is working correctly. Now, the problem is that when I originally put that into the control room, I ran into the same issues because I had set up the control room as with an Ambisonics output. And obviously, if I put WaveSNX in the Ambisonics version into the control room, it would not recognize the plugin, and it would never work. However, since then I realized that all I really need to do is put it on a quadraphonic bus. So I can actually do the same thing in the control room. So instead of doing a Ambisonics output, I'm going to add a quadraphonic output to the control room, and then we actually will be able to get that to work. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to go into the studio settings and into the audio connections. And in the audio connections, I'm going to add an additional output. And the output is going to be a quadraphonic output. And let's call that WaveSNX. So that's going to be the WaveSNX output. And we are going to turn that into our main mix. And then we are going to disconnect because we want to use the control room feature. We're going to disconnect the audio interface, which essentially means that now currently nothing is really kind of playing here. And then I'm going to go into the control room, and I'm going to add a monitor channel. So I'm going to add an additional monitor and a monitor channel, and that monitor channel is going to be the quadro monitor bus. And now I currently only have a stereo interface, so I only have a very standard IO Station 24C, which is a PreSonus audio interface. So I need to connect the channels to that audio interface. Now the way WaveSNX works, it's going to take in the 4 channels and it's going to interpret them as first order Ambisonics, and then it's going to output a stereo signal within the first 2 channels. So the first 2 are actually left and right. So we're going to connect the left channel to the main out left and the right channel to the main out right. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to connect the Ambisonics bus to the WaveSNX output. All right, so there's one more thing. Let me just also move that WaveSNX output to the right so that I have everything here. And then if I'm now playing, I'm actually not hearing anything. Why I'm not hearing anything? The reason I'm not hearing anything is because the MB decoder that Nuendo has cannot decode an ambisonic signal into a quadraphonic signal. It currently thinks that this is actually a quadraphonic bus, and or a quadraphonic output, and the MB decoder can't convert. So if we want to move that signal from the Ambisonics bus into the quadraphonic output, we need to change the decoder plugin, and we actually not only need to change it, we actually need to disable it completely, because we actually want to trick Nuendo into thinking that quadraphonic control room output is actually a first order Ambisonics output. So we need to disable that decoder completely. If you click here, you can't really disable that decoder itself. So what you need to do is you need to first change that to the standard panner. And once you've changed it to the standard panner, you can then disable that. And now it's going to move the signal through the Ambisonics bus into the quadraphonic output. It's going to be first order Ambisonics. Let me also disable the panning in the output directly, because once again, we actually don't really have a quadraphonic signal. We have an Ambisonic signal, so we need to disable that as well. So the last thing I need to do is I need to switch the control room out to the second monitor. The second monitor is now the monitor that takes in the quadraphonic signal. So let me go back here. Let's select the second monitor, and let's make sure that we have a quadraphonic signal. And that is really important, because otherwise the system is going to downmix, and because we have disabled the signal, it's not going to sound correctly. But if we have the quadraphonic signal, and we're currently only taking the first two channels, those are going to the left and the right channel in the audio interface, we're going to hear the mono channel left and the side channel right. So the next thing I need to do is I need to put the Waves NX plugin onto this quadraphonic bus. Now we have a quadraphonic output, and that means that Waves NX should actually work there. So that essentially means I'm selecting the second monitor, and I'm going to go into the inserts, and I'm going to add Waves NX. And once again, we're going to add the Ambisonics version of Waves NX. This is going to open up Ambisonics version. Now I have not yet connected the tracking device. So let's see if it's now taking in the signal. And it isn't, indeed is. So if we move the panning function left right, we actually can now listen on the control room. Now let me just make sure that everything works with the actual head tracking. So let me turn on my head tracker, and let me restart that. Now, as we said before, that can be a little bit icky on a Windows machine. Let me just wait until, where is it? Add a Bluetooth device. Have the tracker. Okay, here we are. The tracker came, and let me go back to the. Oops. Sorry. So let me set the sweet spot. And I now can move, and you're going to hear it in exactly the same way I'm hearing it. So as I'm moving my head to the left, you hear it on the right channel. As I'm moving the head to the right, I'm hearing it on the left. And once again, the big advantage now is that this is also going to monitor vertical information. I'm not going to see vertical information here, but essentially it is doing that. Whereas the 7.1 and 5.1 versions don't really obviously are only having horizontal information, which depending on your application might actually be perfectly fine. So it depends a lot on what exactly you want to achieve, and depending on that, it will actually work fine. Now the last thing I want to do is I want to also take advantage of the second monitor that I have. The second monitor is just a regular stereo monitor, and I might want to just be able to switch between a regular binaural downmix and the Waves NX, the head tracking enabled downmix. And the problem that we have now is that if we do that in the way it is set up right now, obviously, as we said before, the signal that is reaching the control room is an ambisonic signal disguised as a quadraphonic signal. That essentially means that the control room is not decoding it correctly, and we actually took care of that by enabling the decoder completely. That essentially means that in order for us to make that signal in any way, shape, or form usable, we actually need to add an additional decoder plugin. But that's actually fairly simple. Now, before we do that, there's one more thing I need to do. Let's go back into the studio settings, and I currently have the first monitor disconnected completely. So let's also connect it to my audio output, to my audio interface. which essentially means that if I'm now playing that, I can either play it through Waves.NX. Let me just open that again to see that that is actually working. Or I can play it through the other monitor, in which case I'm getting the Ambisonics signal once again, mono on the left, side channel on the right. So in order for that to work, I need to add a separate decoder plugin. And there are a couple of different options, and quite frankly, not all of them really work. But the one that actually does work, which is also quite frankly one of the better ones, is the DVR Micro Ambi decoder. So if we go to DVR Ambi Micro, that is a free plugin. I did in one of the question and answer videos, I actually talked about that briefly. I'm going to post a link to that in the description below, but that's actually a really, really good one. So let's add that here, and that is now my binaural downmix. So I now have a binaural downmix. So now for the DVR plugin to work correctly, we also need to make sure that we are only having a quadraphonic signal, because if we allow Nuendo to downmix in any way, shape or form, it's going to throw out the third and fourth channel, which means that we're going to lose some important information. So we always need to make sure that the quadraphonic is enabled here, and we can now switch between the DVR binaural version. So let me just see how that works. So this is just a binaural downmix using the DVR plugin, or I can use the head tracking version. And I can switch between those two. Now I might change the gain a little, so make sure that they're sounding in sync. So I think if we are somewhere around 8 minus 8 dB, it's again regular binaural downmix and head tracked version. Downmix, head tracked version. Now there are a couple of advantages to that setup. If you do it like that, then essentially, because it is set up in the studio settings, that will be automatically populated whenever you create a new project. So that is a more persistent setup. There are a couple of disadvantages obviously as well. We cannot really bounce the output, because the output once again is it's in the wrong format. It's a quadraphonic bus a quadraphonic out that outputs actually a first order Ambisonics file. So we need to be careful in how we use that. And so depending on how you're using Waves.NX in this context, you might want to choose to go this route or the other route. But it's nice to know that actually it can be done, and it works reasonably well. Now, that is everything I wanted to say today. Thank you. First of all, thanks so much for all the questions. This kind of without your questions, I would not have kind of thought about kind of giving this a second chance. And if you have any more comments, any questions, please let me know. I try to answer them as soon as I can. Most of my videos, as it turns out, are actually starting to become really responses to questions and comments that I get in the question and comment section. If you liked that video, please don't forget to press like. If you get value for the things that I'm talking about, please subscribe. That is apparently important in YouTube. And other than that, see you at the next video.